My brother-in-law called me on a Wednesday afternoon in late October, which was unusual because he almost never called during work hours. He was the kind of man who texted, short messages, no punctuation, never an explanation point. So when his name came up on my screen while I was eating lunch at my desk, I picked up before the second ring. "I need you to come out to your mother's place," he said. "I found something when I was putting up the bathroom floor. You're going to want to see it." He paused. "Come by yourself if you can." I asked him what he meant by that. He said, "Just come alone. I'll explain when you get here." My mother had been gone for 5 months. She passed in May, quietly, the way she had always moved through the world, without announcing herself, without taking up more space than she needed. She was 71. Her doctor said it was a pulmonary embolism, sudden and without warning, and that there was nothing anyone could have done differently. I have thought about that sentence more times than I can count. She had lived alone in the house in Decatur since my father moved out in 1998. I was 19 that year. My sister Laurie was 16, and neither of us had been told the full story of why he left. He was gone by the time I came home from my first semester of college. His clothes taken from the closet, his tools gone from the garage, and my mother sitting at the kitchen table with her hands around a mug of coffee that had gone cold. She told us he needed to go find something and that she hoped he found it. That was all she ever said about it. My father had died 2 years before my mother in a VA hospital in Birmingham. Liver. He and I had managed something like a relationship in the last decade of his life. Careful, infrequent phone calls, 1 visit a year if I could manage it. A gradual understanding on both our parts that we were not going to resolve what had broken, but that we could at least not let it fester. He left me a watch and a folding knife. I kept them both. After my mother passed, Laurie and I had been working through the house in the way you do. Slowly, with long breaks, finding reasons to put off the hard rooms. She lived in Chattanooga and drove up most weekends when she could. The bathroom upstairs had been on the list for a while. The tile was original, the subfloor was showing water damage along the base of the tub, and my brother-in-law Pete had offered to do the work. He did this kind of thing on weekends, not professionally, just for family. He was methodical and honest, and I trusted him completely. I drove the 25 minutes to Decatur with the windows down even though it was cold. The Bradford pear out front had gone orange, and half the leaves were already on the ground. My mother had never liked that tree. She used to say it was vain, the way it bloomed so early and smelled like nothing good. Pete's truck was in the driveway. He was waiting on the front step, not inside, and that told me something. He was a big man, Pete, the kind who filled a doorway without trying. He'd been married to Laurie for 11 years, and I had never once seen him rattle easily. He shook my hand when I came up the walk and held it a beat longer than usual. I pulled the subfloor panel up from the corner near the wall, he said as we went inside. There's a section back behind the cabinet, cut and reset, real clean. Someone knew what they were doing. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I almost missed it. I wasn't looking for it. The bathroom was small, the way bathrooms in houses built in the 70s are small. Pete had pulled the vanity cabinet away from the wall and taken up the tile in the subfloor in the back corner. There was a square cut into the structural panel, maybe 14 inches on each side, fitted back into place with a fiction fit. No hardware visible unless you were crouching down and looking for it. A small notch had been carved into one edge, just enough to fit a finger. I didn't open it, Pete said from the doorway. I figured I'd call you first. I crouched down and fit my finger into the notch and pulled up. The panel came free. It had been cut precisely, the kind of cut my mother could not have made herself. Someone else had done this. Someone who knew how to use a circular saw and a chisel, and who understood that if you did it right, no one would ever know it was there. Inside, sitting between the joists on a piece of folded cloth, was a shoebox. Not a document box, not anything purchased for the purpose. A regular shoebox, the kind you'd get with a pair of dress shoes. It had been sealed with 2 rubber bands that had dried out and snapped when I touched them. Pete said, "I'll be downstairs," and left without me having to ask him. I sat on the bathroom floor for a moment before I opened it. The house was quiet, the way old houses get quiet in October. The walls contracting with the cold, small sounds that aren't footsteps but make you think of them anyway. Inside the shoebox, there were three things. A spiral-bound notebook, the standard kind you'd find at any Walgreens, college-ruled, with a piece of masking tape on the cover that said, in my mother's handwriting, for Teddy. That was what she called me. My name is Theodore, and I had not been called Teddy by anyone except her since I was about 12 years old. Under the notebook, a bank statement from an account I didn't recognize, a credit union I'd never heard of, printed on paper that was stiff and slightly yellowed. The most recent balance on the statement, dated September of last year, was just over $62,000, and under that, a photograph. A Polaroid, the old kind with the white border. Two people I didn't recognize standing in front of a car I didn't recognize in a parking lot that could have been anywhere. A man and a woman, maybe in their 30s, smiling. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, ask Rennie Shefford. He'll know why. I did not know anyone named Rennie Shefford. I took the box downstairs. Pete made coffee without asking if I wanted any, and we sat at the kitchen table where my mother had sat with her cold cup the night my father left, and I read the notebook. It took me an hour and a half. My mother had not been a demonstrative writer. She wrote the way she talked, which was plainly and without decoration. But what she had written was thorough. She had dated each entry. They went back 9 years. The notebook was about my father, not about their marriage or their divorce or any of the things I might have expected. It was about a business arrangement. My father, in the years before he left, had been the on-site supervisor for a residential construction company in the county. He had worked for a man named Leonard Shefford, who ran the company. According to my mother's notes and the documents she had referenced in the margins, Leonard Shefford had spent the better part of 3 years billing the county for materials and labor on affordable housing projects that had never been fully completed. The overruns on 3 separate projects totaled something in the range of $800,000. My father had known. He had been on site. He had signed off on progress reports that were not accurate. My mother had written, "Your father was not a dishonest man. I need you to understand that first. He was a man who was afraid, and that is a different thing, even if it leads to the same place." I read that sentence 4 times. She had found out 2 years after my father left. She had not gone looking. She had been cleaning out a storage unit they still jointly owned, and had found a box of his work files he had left behind, either by accident or because he could not bring himself to take them. She had read them. She had spent the next year trying to understand what she was reading, teaching herself enough about construction billing and county contract law to follow the paper trail. She had found a retired county auditor through a friend of a friend and paid him $200 for 3 hours of his time going over the documents. He had confirmed what she suspected. She had contacted my father. She had told him what she found. He had said, according to her notes, that Leonard Shefford was not a man you brought a problem to, and that there was nothing to be done about it now. He had said the projects were finished, the money was spent, no one had been hurt. He had said he was sorry, and that he hoped she would let it alone. She had let it alone. For a while. What she had not done during those years was stop watching. Leonard Shefford had retired from the construction business and opened a property management company. He managed rental properties across 3 counties. My mother's notes tracked his company through public records. She had learned how to use the county assessor's website, the Secretary of State's business registry, the court system's public filing portal. She had found 2 civil complaints filed against his property management company by tenants. Both settled quietly. She had found a lien placed and then removed from one of his commercial properties. She had found, most recently, that his son Rennie Shefford was now operating a separate LLC that appeared to share resources, equipment, employees, a registered address, with a property management company in a way that my mother had noted, carefully, might be relevant to anyone interested in looking more closely. She had not used the word fraud. She had written, "I don't know what the right word is for what I found. I know what it looks like. I know what it looks like. I know what a retired county auditor said it looked like. I know I'm not a lawyer, and I know I don't have the energy to fight something I can't see all the edges of. But maybe you do." That sentence. I had to put the notebook down. Pete was watching me from across the table. He had not read it. He had not asked to. She kept this for 9 years, I said, and it didn't come out the way I intended. It came out like something between a statement and a question. Your mother was a careful woman, Pete said. And that was the truest thing anyone had said to me in months. I called my sister from the driveway because I needed the cold air, and I needed to walk around while I talked. Laurie did not say anything for a long time after I finished. I could hear her breathing. She never said a word, Laurie said finally. No, not once. No. Laurie was quiet again. Then, she was protecting us from being angry at Dad. I hadn't thought of it that way yet, but the moment she said it, I knew she was right. My mother had carried this the entire way, alone, in a spiral notebook, in a shoebox, under the bathroom floor. She had not told us while our father was alive because she did not want us to look at him the way she had sometimes looked at him. She had not told us after he died because she knew grief was not the right container for something this complicated. She had left it for after, when there was enough distance to see it clearly. I found Rennie Shefford through a combination of the county business registry and LinkedIn. He was 44, a few years younger than me. He managed his father's property company day to day now that Leonard was in his late 70s. He had a profile photo that showed a man in a fleece vest standing in front of a half-finished building with the careful smile of someone who had learned that smiling was a form of armor. I did not contact him. I called an attorney first. I found her through the County Bar Association's referral service. Her name was Doris Beaumont, and she had 30 years of experience in civil fraud and financial misconduct. I brought her the notebook, the bank statement, the photograph, and a folder I had assembled from the public records my mother had referenced in her margins. I had printed everything, put it in order, the way I imagined my mother would have done if she'd had a few more months. Doris Beaumont sat across from me at her desk and read without speaking for 20 minutes. When she finished, she said, "This is genuinely good work." I said my mother had done it, not me. She looked up. "How long did you say she'd been keeping this?" 9 years. She nodded slowly. "What do you want to happen?" I had thought about that question all the way to her office. I said I wanted to know if there was something real here, or if I was holding a box of grief and old paper. I said I wanted to do what my mother thought I could do, and I needed someone to tell me whether that was possible. She said she would look at what I had and be honest with me within 2 weeks. She was. The Shefford Property Management Company had been operating, according to what Doris and a forensic accountant she brought in were able to document, with a billing structure that routinely charged maintenance and repair costs to tenant-occupied properties while routing the actual work through Rennie Shefford's separate LLC at inflated rates, effectively double billing in a way that had gone unnoticed because the two companies were never officially linked on paper. The County Housing Authority had contracts with the Property Management Company for subsidized units. The overbilling had, by the accountant's conservative estimate, cost the county somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000 over 8 years. My mother had not known the exact mechanism. She had known something was wrong. She had documented the edges of it for 9 years because she was the kind of woman who documented things, and because she believed, apparently, that someday someone would have the energy and the tools to take it the rest of the way. Doris filed a civil complaint. She also referred the documentation to the State Attorney General's office, which had jurisdiction over county housing fraud. That referral took 3 months to get a response. When the response came, it was not the full weight of the law arriving in a clean, satisfying moment. It was a letter confirming receipt and an assigned case number and the information that the matter was under review. I have learned in the past year and a half that under review is where things live for a long time before anything else happens. What did happen sooner was the civil case. Leonard Shefford, through his attorney, proposed a settlement conference 14 months after we filed. Doris and I drove downtown on a grey February morning and sat across a conference table from 2 lawyers and an elderly man in a good suit who looked at the table more than he looked at me. The settlement took 6 hours and 3 separate adjournments. I cannot disclose the terms. I will say that my mother's $62,000 is still sitting in the credit union account. I have not touched it. I am listed as the beneficiary. I had my attorney confirm it, and the credit union confirmed that my mother had set up the designation herself 4 years before she died. She had been making regular deposits. She had not touched the principal. I don't know yet what to do with it. Laurie says we should use it, that Mom saved it to be used. My wife says we're both overthinking it, and that the woman who saved it already told us it was our decision. She's probably right. The photograph is still something I think about. Rennie Shefford, I assume that's who it was, had confirmed during the settlement process through his attorney that the man in the Polaroid was his father at a project site sometime in the 90s. He did not explain the woman. His attorney said it was not relevant. Doris agreed it was not relevant to the case. I still have the photograph. I have not found anyone who can tell me who she is. Maybe it doesn't matter. My mother kept it for a reason, and I figure the reason will make itself clear eventually, or it won't. And either way, the photograph exists and I have it. I went back to the house in Decatur a few weeks after the settlement. We haven't listed it yet. I keep finding reasons to wait. The Bradford pair out front had dropped everything by then and looked skeletal against the sky, which my mother would have said served it right. Pete finished the bathroom renovation. New tile, new vanity, new subfloor. It looks good, clean. Nothing about it suggests what used to be there. The notch in the floorboard is gone, filled and sanded, covered over with a new tile. I told Pete I wished he had left it. He said he thought about it. I go into the bathroom sometimes when I'm at the house, and I stand in the corner where the cabinet used to be, and I think about my mother in the evenings. I used to think she was just watching television or going to bed early because she was tired, the way a woman who'd raised 2 kids alone got tired. And she was, but she was also doing this, quietly, in a spiral notebook, in a shoebox with dried-out rubber bands, building a record of something she had never been given a fair account of, and had never once, in 30 years, made us feel the weight of. She was not a woman who talked about what she carried. She was a woman who wrote it down. After the settlement was finalized, I drove to Decatur on a Sunday morning and walked to the cemetery 2 blocks from the house, the one she had walked past every day on her way to the library. It was cold and the sky was doing that thing it does in February, where the light comes in flat and sideways and makes everything look like a photograph of itself. I stood at her grave for a while. I didn't have a speech prepared. I'm not that kind of person. And she was not that kind of person. And I think she would have been impatient with a speech. I said out loud to nobody but her, I found the notebook. And then I said, I think I did okay. The wind came through the cemetery from the west, the way it always comes in Alabama in February, cold and low and without apology. That was enough. I think she knew. I only wish I had asked her, while she was still here, what she'd been thinking on all those nights I thought she was just watching the news. I would have liked to have known her the way the notebook knew her. I would have liked to have told her that I thought what she did was brave, even if she would have waved that off and said she was just keeping records. That was what she would have said. She would have said it was just paperwork. She was wrong about that, but I never got to tell her so, and that is the part I carry now, in the particular quiet way of someone who has learned too late how much was always there. I keep thinking about my mother sitting at that kitchen table in 1998, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold, telling 2 kids that their father needed to go find something. She was 43 years old. She had a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old and a house she'd have to carry alone, and she chose in that moment to protect us from the full weight of what had happened. She didn't say he was weak. She didn't say she was angry. She said she hoped he found what he was looking for. That takes something most people don't talk about much. Not just patience, something harder than patience. A decision made quietly to absorb a wound so your children don't have to grow up carrying it with you. What I found in that shoebox didn't make me angry at my father. I was past that by the time I read the notebook. Or maybe I'd just run out of room for it. What it did was make me see my mother differently. She hadn't been passive. She hadn't let it go. She had done something much more difficult, which was to let it sit and study it and build something careful and documented out of it, year after year in a spiral notebook nobody knew existed. She had taught herself enough about county contracts and billing structures to understand what she was looking at. She had found a retired auditor through a friend of a friend and paid him $200 of her own money to sit across a table and confirm what she suspected. She had tracked the Sheffords through public records for 9 years. She had done all of this alone, without telling anyone, without complaint, while working and paying her bills and showing up for us every single time we needed her. That is not weakness. That is not even just strength. That is what it looks like when someone decides that the truth matters enough to document it, even when they have no guarantee anyone will ever act on it. She didn't know I would find it. She hoped I would. She left it for me because she thought I had the tools to take it somewhere she couldn't, and she was right that it would take tools. An attorney, an accountant, 14 months of paperwork, a settlement conference that lasted 6 hours and left me exhausted in a way I hadn't expected. She did the harder part. She did the part that required sitting with something unjust for years, without letting it harden her into someone who talked about it constantly, or used it as an excuse, or made her children carry it with her. I think about what Doris said when she finished reading the notebook. This is genuinely good work. She meant it as a professional observation. But I took it as something else. I took it as the kind of sentence my mother never got to hear and should have, a long time ago. I did not do anything extraordinary. I hired the right people and brought them what my mother had already built. The integrity in this story was hers. The long, unglamorous, private work of paying attention to what was true when it would have been easier to look away. That was hers. What I did was show up and try not to waste it. I think that's the part worth sitting with. Not the settlement, not the case number at the Attorney General's office, not the $62,000 still sitting in a credit union account. The part worth remembering is a woman in Decatur, Alabama, teaching herself how to read a county assessor's filing on a public library computer, alone on a Tuesday night, because she believed that what you know matters even when no one is watching, because she believed, without anyone telling her to, that keeping an honest record of the world is a form of dignity. She was right about that. I just wish I had told her so.